Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Newcastle Unitarians. This morning, we very kindly have the Reverend Stephanie Bisbee taking our service today. So I'd like to hand over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Begin with some music, used kindly by permission of David Kent.
In an uncertain world full of shadow, in a world that is living in fear, I believe that kindness is real, and I believe that charity can heal. So no matter how small or how gentle, and no matter how tiny and frail, no good deed is ever in vain. It has the power to make us whole again. Let us shine like a light in the darkness. Let us brighten the night for a while. For it's love that shows us the way, and it's with love we will change the world today.
With love, we will change the world. I light our chalice for the light of divine love in each of us and for our connection with other Unitarian congregations all over the world. And so that you can see it. See, Louise has got one there too. We gather together in spirit, though separate in space, to encourage one another, to give each other heart. May we be cleansed of cowardice and conceit, and given strength to hold fast to our faith in all that is true and beautiful. May this time together stir our hearts to love and our hands to action. Amen. Our first hymn today is taken, as all our hymns today are, from the Green Hymn Book, Hymns for Living, and it is So Simple is the Human Heart.
Our little song.
don't know if it's your tradition to begin with a story, but it is ours. And I think that this story will be familiar to very many people. It's a story that takes place in ancient Greece, a place of many gods, at a very different time. And at that time, a god of the river was married to a daughter of the ocean god. And they had a son, a beautiful bouncing baby boy, who they called Narcissus. Well, at that time, Narcissus was not a flower, it was not a girl's name. Narcissus was a strong and handsome boy, and his name was very much admired. But as the boy grew, he came to the attention of a soothsayer, a man called Tiresias, who had a strange gift that sometimes he could look at people and see what was going to happen to them. And he saw this boy, and he said to the boy's mother, "Your son will only live until the moment that he sees himself." Well, Narcissus' mother was not best pleased at this idea. She wanted her son to live as long as everyone else, as long as humanly possible. And so she hid all the mirrors in the house, and she hung her curtains at all the windows so that he would never see his own reflection. And she tried as best she could to contain Narcissus so that he didn't go anywhere where he might see his own reflection. But as he grew up, it became harder and harder to contain him. He went walking in the woods one day, and he met a nymph called Echo, and the two of them fell madly in love. But as this was a different time and things worked a little differently, Echo could not tell him of her feelings, because another goddess, Hera, had condemned her only ever to repeat the last thing anyone had said to her. And so when Narcissus asked her, "Are you fond of me?" all she could say was, "Me, me." And Narcissus drew entirely the wrong conclusion from this. All she thinks about is herself, he thought. If only he had said, "Echo, I love you," then he would have heard Echo's voice saying, "Love you, you, you." But he did not. He walked away, sadly, and went down to the riverbank so that he could cry where no one could see him. Well, when he eventually stopped crying, he wiped away his tears, and he looked down at the river. And at that moment he caught sight of his reflection in the smooth water. Never having seen a reflection, he didn't understand that the thing he was looking at was himself. He was just stunned by the beauty of this unfamiliar image. And of course, he stood for so long on the riverbank staring at his reflection that in the end the gods turned him into a flower, so that each spring he would be seen standing on the riverbank staring down at his beautiful image in the water. Strange story, which has rather fascinated me, a story from which I've taken different messages at different times. Holding to that theme of beauty, the beauty of the flower on the riverbank, the beauty of the unspoilt youth. I'm going to read a piece of a poem now, the poem from which today's service title is taken, by Keats. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. Therefore, on every morrow are we wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, spite of despondence, of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and darkened ways made for our searching. Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits, such the sun, the moon, trees old and young sprouting a shady boon for simple sheep, and such are daffodils with the green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make against the hot season. The mid-forest brake, rich with a sprinkling of fair musk-rose blooms. And such too is the grandeur of the dooms we have imagined for the mighty dead, all lovely tales that we have heard or read, an endless fountain of immortal drink pouring to us from the heavens' brink. It's a poem I read for the first time while studying English literature at university, and always find something new in whenever I come back to it. And what I'm particularly loving about it at the moment is the lovely tales that we have heard or read, and seeing those stories as an endless fountain of immortal drink, a font of inspiration, because for me, that's very much what stories are. We come again now to a time where we sing together, though apart in our own separate spaces, our second hymn, which is Spirit Divine, Attend Our Prayer. At York, we started a discussion group a little while back, and it began by looking at the Bible, or one of the Gospels at least, and then we thought it would be interesting also to look at some other texts that have influenced Unitarian thinking. And one of the things that we have been reading recently is an essay by Emerson on nature, which I found very fascinating because I think it's one of the things which really quite changed the current of Unitarian thinking. And I'd like to read a section of it for you now. So this is Emerson writing on nature. To go into solitude, a man needs to retire as much from his chamber as from society. I have to apologise for Emerson's gendered language, but he was writing quite a while ago, so he does mostly talk about men. I apologise. He goes on to say, I am not solitary, whilst I read and write, though nobody is with me. But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars. The rays that come from those heavenly worlds will separate between him and what he touches. One might think the atmosphere was made transparent with this design, to give man in the heavenly bodies the perpetual presence of the sublime. Seen in the streets of cities, how great they are! If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shown? But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light the universe with their admonishing smile. The stars awaken a certain reverence because though always present, they are inaccessible. But all natural objects make a kindred impression when the mind is open to their influence. Nature never wears a mean appearance. Neither does the wisest man extort her secret and lose his curiosity by finding out all her perfection. Nature never became a toy to a wise spirit. The flowers, the apps, the mountains reflected the wisdom of his best hour as much as they had delighted the simplicity of his childhood. When we speak of nature in this manner, we have a distinct but most poetical sense in the mind. We mean the integrity of impression made by manifold natural objects. It is this which distinguishes the stick of timber of the woodcutter from the tree of the poet. The charming landscape which I saw this morning is indubitably made up of some 20 or 30 farms. Miller owns this field, Locke that, and Manning the woodland beyond, but none of them owns the landscape. There is a property in the horizon which no man has but he whose eye can integrate all the parts. That is, the poet. This is the best part of these men's farms, yet to this their warranty deeds give no title. To speak truly, few adult persons can see nature. Most persons do not see the sun, or at least they have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and the heart, child. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirit of infancy even into the era of manhood. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food. In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man in spite of real sorrows. Nature says, he is my creature, and mulgrave all his impertinent griefs, he shall be glad with me. Not the sun or the summer alone, but every hour and season yields its tribute of delight, for every hour and change corresponds to and authorises a different state of the mind, from breathless noon to grimmest midnight. Nature is a setting that fits equally well a comic or a mourning piece. In good health, the air is a cordial of incredible virtue. Crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear. In the woods, too, a man casts off his years as the snake his skin, and at what period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign, a perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods we return reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. So writes Emerson on nature, reminding me of another poem I've always very much loved, the poem God's Grandeur, by Gerard Manley Hopkins. I imagine it'll be familiar to some people, but I'll share it again because it's always a joy to hear. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gather greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge, and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel, being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things. And though the last lights off the black west went, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with, bright wings. I find it incredible how fresh and how relevant much of what Hopkins is saying there still feels today. So much time has passed, but we can still say, more so perhaps than ever, as we walk in nature, in our trainers, with thick air-padded soles, phones in our ears, listening to music on our phones, how far we are from the soil on which we stand. And perhaps that's why I think that we need the spiritual life now more than ever to bring us back to the world in which we live. Anne Lamott says that all prayers are really three prayers: help, thanks, and wow. And I invite you now to spend with me a few moments in contemplation of these three forms of prayer. There is the prayer we feel when the world is too much, the burden too great, and we must call upon something larger than ourselves for support and strength. Let's spend a moment there in silence to think of the challenges in our own lives and those of our loved ones, finding comfort in community and asking that the spirit of hope sustain us. This prayer is the prayer we feel when we remember our blessings, our family, friends and church community, the food we eat, the places we stay, even the devices which are giving us the opportunity to connect with each other despite the distance and the restrictions the pandemic has brought. Let's take a moment to cultivate a feeling of gratitude, whether it's for one of those things or for something else enrich your life this week, whether large or small. The third prayer is the prayer we feel when we are immersed in the beauty and majesty of the world around us, from the tiniest flower in the meadow to the vast spreading oak tree above, from the smallest fish flitting in the teeming depths of the ocean to the grand view of the wide horizon stretching into the distance. As the world begins to open up again after this time of restriction, our final short silence will be to reflect on the small beauties of our homes and neighbourhoods, and the larger vistas that await us as we begin to travel again. May the living energy of spirit fill our hearts and minds with a sense of the sacred during this hour and throughout the week. Amen. I have now a piece of music to share with you, and one which has some personal significance. It comes to you again with the help of David Kent for the music, but the words are mine and were written and inspired by a place which has great personal significance to me, and I suspect possibly to a few other people here, Great Hucklow. So this is David Kent's beautiful music and my words about Great Hucklow.
Here where the tall trees watch over the village, and brooks tumble sparkling through heather-capped hills. Here where the birds dance with silver-winged gliders, and kids from the city find countryside thrills. Where curious cows come and peer over fences, and tiny birds bathe in the rainwater pools. Where blackberries ripen in autumnal hedgerows, gleaming with dewdrops like edible jewels. Here where we walk through the village in darkness, with lanterns reflecting the starlight above, to the chapel whose stones hold a million sweet memories my voice lifts in song, and my heart fills with love.
I said that the story of Narcissus was one which I'd seen in different ways at different times. And I think when I first read it, I slightly thought that what it warned us against was an absorption in physical beauty. It wasn't that strange an idea, the idea of beauty as a temptation, a threat, even as sin. It's a strand that has appeared in religious thinking at various times throughout history. The Quaker George Fox wrote around 1670, "And therefore all friends and people, pluck down your images. I say pluck them out of your houses, walls, and signs or other places, that none of you be found imitators of his Creator, whom you should serve and worship." For George Fox, art which sought to imitate the beauty of nature was the most profound arrogance possible, an attitude which echoes the Islamic approach of turning to the abstract in art in order to not compete with the divine creator of the natural world. But attitudes are like a pendulum, and they change over time. In Emerson and the Transcendentalists, we have an entirely different approach to beauty. Emerson begins his famous essay on nature by acclaiming the loveliness of the natural world, stars, forests, and mountains. And so one might imagine that he would share the desire to dedicate beauty to God and place it in opposition to the work of man. But he does not. Of course, to him, nature is full of beauty. Almost all the individual forms, he says, are agreeable to the eye, as is proved by our endless imitation of some of them, as the acorn, the grape, the pine cone, the wheat ear, the egg, the wings and forms of most birds, the lion's claw, the serpent, the butterfly, seashells, flames, clouds, buds, leaves, and the forms of many trees, as the palm. All of them things which I think you'll find in as many museums and art galleries, on clothing prints and furnishings, as you would have done At Emerson's time, some things did not change. Emerson goes on to say, all men are in some degree impressed by the face of the world, some men even to delight. This love of beauty is taste. Others have the same love in such excess that, not content with admiring, they seek to embody it in new forms. The creation of beauty is art. The production of a work of art throws a light upon the mystery of humanity. A work of art is an abstract or epitome of the world. It is the result or expression of nature in miniature. For although the works of nature are innumerable and all different, the result or the expression of them all is similar. Nature is a sea of forms radically alike and even unique. A leaf, a sunbeam, a landscape, the ocean make an analogous impression on the mind. What is common to them all, that perfectness and harmony, is beauty. The standard of beauty is the entire circuit of natural forms. Nothing is quite beautiful alone. Nothing but is beautiful in the whole. A single object is only so far beautiful as it suggests this universal grace. The poet, the painter, the sculptor, the musician, the architect seek each to concentrate this radiance of the world on one point and to satisfy the love of beauty which stimulates him to produce. Thus is art, a nature passed through the alchemy of man. Thus in art does nature work through the will of a man filled with the beauty of her first works. Emerson sums up the connection between beauty and art this way. The world exists to the soul to satisfy the desire of beauty. No reason can be asked or given. The soul seeks beauty. Beauty in its largest and profoundest sense is one expression for the universe. God is the all-fair. Truth and goodness and beauty are but different faces of the same all. But beauty in nature is not ultimate. It is the herald of inward and eternal beauty, and is not alone a solid and satisfactory good. It must stand as a part, and not as yet the last or highest expression of the final cause of nature. Well, Keats wrote, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever," and Emerson is akin to Keats. He finds beauty in nature and art alike. But when Keats famously wrote about the lasting elegance of a Grecian urn, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. He began to draw together art and philosophy. Emerson, writing not so long after Keats's early death, went further and made a spiritual claim. Not just truth and beauty, but truth and goodness and beauty, the different faces of the same all. And I wonder whether it would be an exaggeration to say that this may be one of the most important claims ever made for Unitarians. In the absence of a shared belief, a dogma or creed that brings us together, each of us led by the promptings of our own conscience to a different understanding of the world, a different understanding of what the spiritual life demands of us, where can we find the unity which other traditions find in their shared belief? For me, and for many Unitarians I've spoken to, it's found, at least in part, in the spirituality that comes from shared contemplation of the beautiful. Whether that's taking an excursion together into nature, or whether it's the lyrical melody of a familiar hymn tune, the words of a much-loved poem, the flowers on the altar table, or the light coming through a stained glass window. When Sue Woolley conducted the survey of Unitarian views which became the Lindsay Press book Together in Diversity, some of the practices which were mentioned as central to Unitarian spirituality included spending time in nature, sharing prayer, meditation, and reflection on poetry and spiritual texts. One person wrote, "I walk in the forest and commune with nature. I gaze at the sky and think of the wonder of existence and the miracle of life." Emerson would recognise this, I think, and so would Anne Lamott, as the third of her 3 categories of prayer. Wow! because the divine is, as one respondent to Sue's questionnaire said, unseen, unknowable wonder, which keeps the entire universe from the vast to the infinitesimal connected. Or it is the mystery beyond our words to express. Perhaps we can only reach for the divine through art, through echoes of the beauty around us. The grandeur of spirit that charges the world and flames out like shining from shook foil. And perhaps then, Narcissus's mistake was not, as I first thought, to love beauty. Instead, it was the self-absorption which turned the whole world into just an echo of himself, instead of an echo of divinity. Of course, perhaps not. I'm sure everyone will have their own interpretation of this, as of all myths, but there, for what it's worth and for food for thought, is mine. Then we come now to our closing words, which are by Rabindranath Tagore. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that's in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death, in ebb and flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life, and my pride is from the life throb of ages dancing in my blood this moment. May the stream of life run vibrant in your veins, and your way through life be brightened by flowers, and the light ages dance in your blood this moment and every moment.
If God is love, then I shall love the human family. And love goes around till it comes back here and warms a place in me. The world is big and I am small as I look into the sky. But in my heart I'm not so small, and I feel like I could fly. If God is love, then I shall love the human family. And love goes around till it comes back here and warms a place in me. The world is big and I am small as I look into the sky. But in my heart I'm not so small, and I feel like I could fly. If God is love, then I shall love the human family. And love goes around till it comes back here and warms a place in me. And warms a place in me.
And I bring also greetings from Myrna Michelle, whose words we just heard sung. That's to be remembered to you. Thank you very much for inviting me to your service today, and I hope I can stay for a short while to join the chat.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you. That was a hugely enjoyable service, and I very much personally enjoyed the trip through some past English literature, or poetry in particular. Thank you.